Welcome back to Lina's Romantasy collection, where the kings are possessive and the witches never know when to shut up. Quick question for the pack before we dive into today's chaos. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments. Also, drop a raven emoji if your pet is currently staring at you like you've lost your mind for listening to this. Today, we have a wild one. It's funny, it's tense, and it involves one very clumsy alchemist and a king who is way too thirsty for his own good. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to stories just like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the shop running and the stories coming. Now, take a deep breath. The potion is in the air and the king is ready to play. Let's read. Chapter 1. Zara hated rich people. She hated their silk clothes, their loud laughs, and the way they ignored their debts. But she needed their coin. Her apothecary shop stood on the edge of bankruptcy. She stood at the entrance of the royal courtyard, adjusting the strap of her scuffed leather potion bag. The bag dug into her shoulder, heavy with glass vials. She brushed a hand down the front of her borrowed ruby-red dress. Her hands shook. Faint purple potion stains marked her knuckles. She tried to rub them off, but the stains stayed. I am going to wring the neck of the next noble who ignores my invoice, she thought. Doom. A rough voice croaked near her ankles. Doom and starvation. Zara looked down. Edgar, her large black raven, waddled across the cobblestones. He missed half his tail feathers. He refused to fly. He just marched everywhere on foot like an angry old man. Hush, Edgar, Zara whispered. We need to find Lord Hemlock. He owes me for 3 crates of sleep syrup. I hit him with the debt binder, he pays up, and we go home. She reached into her bag and pulled out a corked glass bottle. Bright pink liquid sloshed inside. The debt binder. It forced the drinker to hand over whatever they owed. She stepped into the courtyard. Golden lanterns hung from the trees. Music drifted through the night air. Waiters carried silver trays of champagne. Zara kept her eyes peeled for Hemlock. She spotted a group of nobles near a towering stone fountain. She marched forward. Edgar waddled right behind her, his claws clicking on the stone. End of days, the bird squawked at a passing waiter. Zara walked faster. She did not watch her feet. A raised stone step jutted out from the path. The toe of her shoe caught the edge. Gravity took over. Zara pitched forward. The pink bottle slipped from her fingers. Time seemed to slow down. She reached for the glass, but her hands grasped empty air. A tall figure stepped out from behind the fountain. The glass bottle slammed hard against a broad, muscular chest. It shattered. Pink liquid exploded outward in a sticky wave. Zara hit the ground, scraping her knees on the stone. She gasped, fighting to get her breath back. The fall knocked the wind from her lungs. She looked up, ready to apologize. The words died in her throat. She did not hit a noble, she hit the king. Rurik stood above her. He wore a dark, unbuttoned dress shirt. The pink potion soaked the fabric and dripped down his bare skin. He was towering, a predator in human skin. Brilliant gold eyes stared down at her. Dark hair fell over his forehead. He wore a heavy signet ring carved from white gold, a safe metal for his kind, since pure silver burned werewolf skin. He did not flinch. He did not yell. He just looked at the shattered glass at his boots, then down at Zara. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. Oh, great. I just assaulted the most dangerous man in the kingdom. I am going to die in a dungeon. Zara started, scrambling back. Rurik stepped closer. He reached up. He dragged a long finger across his own chest, scooping up a thick drop of the pink liquid. Zara froze. Do not ingest that! It is a... Rurik brought his finger to his mouth. He licked the pink potion off his skin. His gold eyes locked onto hers, burning with a strange, dark heat. A slow grin spread across his face, showing the sharp points of his teeth. I was already thirsty, Rurik purred. Edgar stopped waddling. The raven looked up at the king, tilted his head, and let out a single loud croak. Tragedy. Chapter 2. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Heavy boots pounded against the cobblestones. "Secure the king!" a voice roared. General Bram rushed through the crowd. The loyal guard had a strict buzz cut and a jagged scar slicing through his left eyebrow. He drew a wicked-looking blade. A dozen armored guards surrounded Zara, their weapons drawn. Zara scrambled to her feet, clutching her leather bag to her chest. She raised her hands. Raw magic hummed under her skin, pulling straight from the earth beneath her shoes. If they lunged, she would fight. She refused to back down from a pack of overgrown dogs. "Stand down!" Rurik commanded. His voice did not boom, but it carried a weight that made the guards freeze. "Sire, she attacked you," Bram argued, his eyes fixed on the pink stain on Rurik's shirt. "I tripped," Zara snapped. She lifted her chin. "I am an apothecary, not an assassin. You guards need better glasses." Rurik let out a low, rough laugh. He waved a hand. "Put the steel away, Bram. She is right. It was just a clumsy mistake." Bram hesitated, then sheathed his blade. The guards stepped back, but their eyes stayed on Zara. Rurik took a step closer to her. The distance between them vanished. Then it happened. The magic kicked in. The debt-binder potion was meant to compel honesty and payment, but it touched werewolf blood. It touched a king. The spell twisted, hijacked by ancient predator instincts. A violent spark snapped in the air between them. Zara gasped. A sudden foreign sensation flooded her mind. It was not her own thought. It felt like dark amusement. It felt like hunger. She stared at Rurik. He stared back. His gold eyes widened for a fraction of a second. The grin faded from his mouth. "What did you give me, witch?" the voice echoed. It did not come from his lips. It echoed inside her head. Zara stumbled back a step. The mind link. The potion forged a two-way bridge between their brains. She felt his heartbeat in her own chest. She felt his sheer, predatory amusement wrapping around her panic. It was a mistake, she thought back, her mind racing. "Let me go, and I will brew a cure." Rurik's grin returned, sharper this time. "I do not want a cure." He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was ironclad, but it did not hurt. "Let go of me," Zara warned out loud. She narrowed her eyes. "Or I will spark a fire that burns your favorite boots to ash." "Empty threats," Rurik said. He looked at Bram. "Bring my car around to the front gates. The event is over." "Where are you taking me?" Zara demanded. She yanked her arm, but his grip held firm. "Home," Rurik replied. "You just poisoned a king. You are coming with me for a private interrogation." Edgar waddled up to Rurik's boots and pecked the toe of his shoe. "Kidnap," the bird muttered. Rurik looked down at the bald, grumpy bird. He sighed, reaching his free hand into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a saltine cracker and tossed it to the ground. Edgar snapped it up and went quiet. "The bird comes too," Rurik said. He pulled Zara toward the exit. Chapter 3. The sleek, cobalt-blue sports coupe tore down the winding road toward the royal castle. Rurik sat behind the wheel. He drove fast. The engine roared, a mechanical beast eating up the miles of dark road. Zara sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed tight over her chest. Her scuffed bag rested at her feet. Edgar stood on the dashboard. The raven tapped his beak against the glass windshield, glaring at the passing trees. The scent of the car hit Zara. It smelled of crushed sage and toasted sugar. It was Rurik's scent. It filled the small space, wrapping around her senses. It made her stomach do a strange, nervous flip. She pushed the feeling down. Through the mind link, she felt Rurik's satisfaction. He knew his scent affected her. "Smug bastard," she thought, projecting it loud and clear across the bond. Rurik shifted gears. He did not look away from the road. "I can hear you, little witch." "Stop doing that," Zara said out loud. She glared at his profile. "Stay out of my head." "You built the door," Rurik countered. "I am just walking through it." Zara ground her teeth. She needed to escape. The coven elders warned her to stay away from the royal pack. If they found out she bonded with the Lycan King, they would burn her shop to the ground. She glanced at the door handle. They were taking a sharp corner. The speed dropped. It was risky, but she had survived worse falls. She reached for the handle. Her fingers wrapped around the metal. She braced her legs to tuck and roll. Click! The door locked. Zara whipped her head toward the center console. Rurik's finger rested on the master lock button. He kept his eyes on the road. A smug, victorious feeling washed over the mind link. "Unlock this door right now," Zara demanded. "I am not your prisoner." "You are a flight risk," Rurik said, "and I prefer my guests in one piece." "I will shatter the glass," she warned. Magic pooled in her palms, warming her skin. Rurik finally turned his head to look at her. His gold eyes caught the faint light from the dashboard. "Try it. See what happens when you break my property." The challenge in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. He thrived on the conflict. He wanted her to fight back. Zara let the magic fade from her hands. She would bide her time. Outside, the car sped past a cluster of dark pine trees. Zara did not see the figures hiding in the branches, but the coven's spies watched the cobalt-blue coupe speed toward the castle gates. The spies pulled black cloaks tight around their shoulders. They had their target. Chapter 4. The private guest suite at the castle felt like a velvet cage. Zara paced the length of the room. The floors were dark hardwood, covered by a thick silver rug. A large four-poster bed sat in the center. She ignored the luxury. She only cared about the heavy oak door leading out to the hallway. She marched to the door and grabbed the brass handle. It turned, but the heavy wood refused to budge. Locked from the outside. "Open the door!" Zara yelled, pounding her fist against the wood. A key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Rurik stood in the frame. He had ditched the ruined shirt. He now wore a fresh, black Henley that stretched tight across his broad chest. "Stop pacing," Rurik said, leaning against the doorframe. "You are giving me a headache through the link." "Then break the bond and let me leave," Zara shot back. She did not back away. She stepped right up to him, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. "I cannot break it," Rurik stated. "The magic is yours. You fix it." "I need my lab to brew a counteragent. I need my cauldron," she argued. Rurik crossed his arms. "You stay here. My guards will fetch whatever roots and weeds you need from your shop." "I do not want your guards near my things," Zara's temper flared. Raw chaos magic answered her anger. It pulled from the floorboards, rushing up her legs and into her hands. She raised a hand. A hot, crackling bolt of blue energy sparked between her fingers. She pressed her glowing hand right against the side of his neck. The heat singed the collar of his shirt. "Let me go home, dog," she whispered, her voice dropping dangerous and low. "I will fry your vocal cords. Try me." Rurik did not flinch. He did not pull away from the burning magic. His gold eyes flared bright. Instead of stepping back, he stepped into her space. He reached out and gripped her waist. His large hands locked onto her hips, pulling her flush against his hard chest. The sudden movement knocked the breath out of her. Fire met ice. Her chaotic heat clashed against his unyielding dominance. "Do it," Rurik challenged, his voice a low rumble vibrating against her chest. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Burn me, little witch. Let us see who breaks first." Zara's pulse hammered. The mind link pulsed with raw, undeniable heat. She felt his heartbeat thudding a frantic rhythm, matching her own. He was not scared. He was captivated. "I am going to ruin his life," Zara thought. "I look forward to it," Rurik's voice echoed in her mind. Chapter 5. Rurik dropped his hands from her hips. The sudden loss of his heat left a cold ache in Zara's chest. He took a step backward, putting physical distance between their bodies. His brilliant gold eyes tracked her face, reading the defiance etched into her features. He did not say another word. He just turned and strode out of the guest suite. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind him. A brass lock tumbled into place. Zara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her knees throbbed. The adrenaline from her fall in the courtyard finally faded, leaving behind a sharp, biting sting. She looked down. The fabric of her borrowed ruby-red dress hung in frayed tatters around her kneecaps. Blood crusted against the torn silk. "I need a strong drink and a new dress," she thought. She hobbled over to the four-poster bed and sank into the mattress. Edgar waddled out from beneath the thick silver rug. The raven hopped onto her scuffed leather potion bag resting on the dark hardwood floor. He tapped his beak against the brass buckle. "Ruin!" Edgar squawked. "Tragedy and ruin!" "I know, you grumpy feather duster," Zara sighed. She leaned down and unclasped the bag. She dug through the glass vials until her fingers brushed a small, round tin. She popped the lid off. The scent of crushed mint and beeswax filled the air, a simple healing salve. She scooped out a dollop and rubbed it over her scraped knees. The magic in the ointment sparked, cooling the raw skin. It would not fix the torn dress, but it stopped the bleeding. Edgar lost interest in the bag. He found a loose button near the bedpost and started pecking it, trying to drag it under the bed to build a nest. A sudden, strange chill crept into the room. The shadows in the corner stretched and twisted, reaching across the rug. The floorboards groaned under an invisible weight. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. Zara snapped the tin shut. She stood up, ignoring the lingering ache in her legs. Magic hummed under her fingernails, eager for a fight. "Show yourself!" she demanded. The shadows coalesced. A shimmering, translucent figure materialized in the center of the room. It was Matron Sybil, the head of the local witch coven. The elder wore a high-collared velvet robe, her face twisted into a cruel sneer. This was a magical projection, a piece of dark energy sent from miles away. "You always were a clumsy fool, Zara," the projection hissed. Sybil's voice echoed like dry leaves scraping across a stone tomb. "Get out of my room, Sybil," Zara warned. "I didn't invite you. Your magic is trespassing." "You bonded with the beast," Sybil said, ignoring the threat. She floated closer, her translucent form casting an eerie blue light on the walls. "We felt the surge in the Earth's current. You hold a mind link with the Lycan King. The spell worked better than expected." "It was an accident. The potion backfired. It hit his bare skin." "I do not care about your excuses," Sybil snapped. "The coven faces financial ruin. Our vaults echo with empty space. The bank seized our assets. We need coin, and the king hoards mountains of it." Zara clenched her fists. "I am not stealing for you. Fix your own bank accounts." Sybil laughed. The sound grated against Zara's ears. "You owe us your loyalty, street rat. We took you in when you had nothing. Now you will use that link. You will dig into the beast's mind. You will extract the security codes to the royal vaults and bring them to me." "No," Zara said. Her voice remained steady. "I left the coven for a reason. I run my own shop now. I survive on my own terms." The projection flickered, turning an angry crimson. "Your shop stands on our land. Refuse this task, and I will burn your pathetic apothecary to ash. I will scatter your jars to the wind. You will have nothing." Panic flared in Zara's chest. Her shop was her sanctuary. It held all her tools, her ingredients, her livelihood. The fear spiked, sharp and sudden like a punch to the gut. Through the mind link, that fear vanished from her mind, sucked away like a vacuum. Rurik felt it. She felt his answering rage rumble through the bond, hot and violent. Before Sybil could issue another threat, the heavy oak door burst open. Rurik filled the doorway. He wore the same black Henley, his chest heaving. He took one look at the glowing, spectral figure of Matron Sybil. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He crossed the room in 3 massive strides. His fist swung through the air, colliding directly with the center of the magical projection. The impact sounded like shattering glass. The spell broke apart into 1,000 glittering pieces, raining down on the rug before fading into nothingness. Rurik turned to Zara. His gold eyes blazed. "Who was that?" he demanded. Chapter 6. The silence in the room stretched tight, broken only by the sound of Rurik's heavy breathing. The faint scent of crushed mint and beeswax lingered in the air from Zara's salve, masking the scent of the broken magic. "I ask you a question, witch," Rurik growled. He stepped closer, his boots crunching over the invisible remnants of the projection. "Who was in my castle?" Zara crossed her arms over her chest, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. She refused to cower. "That was Matron Sybil, the head of the local coven. It was just a projection, not a physical breach." "She threatened you," Rurik stated. It wasn't a question. Through the mind link, he had felt her sudden spike of panic. "She threatened my shop," Zara corrected. "She wants me to use this accidental mind link to steal the security codes to your royal vaults. The coven is completely broke. Their spell sales tanked, and they have 0 coin left. They are desperate." Rurik let out a harsh, barking laugh. He ran a hand through his dark hair. "They want to rob me? They sent a ghost into my fortress to demand my gold." "They are arrogant," Zara said, "and they do not care who gets caught in the crossfire. Sybil promised to burn my apothecary to the ground if I refuse." "Let them try," Rurik challenged. He began to pace the length of the room. His broad shoulders blocked the light from the window. "I have been looking for a reason to crush that treacherous coven for years. They hide behind technicalities and treaties. This gives me cause." "This gives you cause?" Zara snapped. She stepped into his path, forcing him to stop. "This is my life, my shop. I am not a pawn for your political games, dog. If they come for my business, I will handle them myself." Rurik looked down at her. The anger in his gold eyes shifted into that same dark amusement she felt in the courtyard. "You? With your scuffed bag of glass vials? Sybil has dozens of trained witches at her command." "I have enough fire to burn them all," Zara whispered. Magic danced across her knuckles, casting a faint purple glow in the dim light. "I know you do," Rurik purred. He reached out and caught her wrist, his thumb tracing the faint potion stains on her skin. "But why fight them alone when you can use my army?" Zara narrowed her eyes. "What is the catch?" "No catch, just a trap," Rurik explained. He released her wrist and stepped back. "The coven elders are cowards. They hide in the shadows. We need to draw them out into the open where my guards can reach them." "How?" "You," Rurik said. "We use you as bait. We show them that you are close to me. We make them think you are in position to steal the codes. When they strike, we catch them in the act." Zara ground her teeth. "He wants to dangle me like a piece of meat." "I am hosting a council dinner tonight," Rurik continued. "The room will be full of snobby nobles and hidden spies. You will attend by my side. We will make a public spectacle." "Look at me," Zara said, gesturing to her ruined ruby-red dress. The hem was torn, and blood crusted the fabric around her knees. "I cannot attend a royal dinner looking like a street brawler." "I will send a maid with a proper dress," Rurik dismissed. He walked toward the door. "Be ready in an hour, and bring the bird. He amuses me." Edgar popped his head out from under the bed. He squawked and pecked the floorboards. Doom and crackers. Rurik reached into his pocket, pulled out a saltine, and tossed it to the raven before walking out the door. Chapter 7. The sapphire blue gown fit like a glove. Zara stared at her reflection in the tall mirror. The maid had delivered the dress an hour ago, along with a pair of sleek black heels. The silk fabric cascaded down to the floor, hiding her scraped knees. The bodice was tight, holding her secure. She left her dark, curly hair wild and loose around her shoulders. She grabbed her scuffed leather potion bag, refusing to leave her magic behind, and slung it over her shoulder. A knock sounded at the oak door. Rurik waited in the hallway. He wore a tailored black suit that made his broad chest look even more intimidating. His white gold signet ring caught the torchlight. He looked at her. The mind link pulsed with a sudden hot wave of approval. "Keep your thoughts to yourself," Zara projected back, though a flush crept up her neck. Rurik just offered a sharp grin and extended his arm. She took it. They walked down the stone corridors toward the grand dining hall. The air grew warm, filled with the rich smells of roasting meats and spiced wine. The heavy wooden double doors swung open. The dining hall buzzed with conversation. Dozens of nobles sat at a grand, long table. Human servants navigated the room, their hands covered in thick white gloves to safely carry the heavy silver serving trays. Werewolves could not touch silver without protective gear, and Rurik kept his staff safe. The moment Rurik and Zara stepped through the doors, the conversation died. Every eye locked onto Zara. They recognized the street apothecary. They saw the worn bag clashing with the sapphire blue silk. Rurik escorted her to the head of the table. He pulled out a chair to his right. Zara sat down. Edgar the Raven waddled in right behind them, marching under the table to hide among the polished boots and table legs. A pale, thin man sitting across from Zara sneered. Lord Alistair. "Sire," Alistair said, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "We were not expecting extra company, especially company from the lower market." Zara tightened her grip on her leather bag. She felt Rurik's temper flare through the link, a low, dangerous hum. "She is my guest, Alistair," Rurik stated, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Of course," Alistair continued, swirling his wine glass. He looked at Zara's hands, resting on the white tablecloth. The faint purple potion stains stood out against the clean linen. Though one might expect a royal guest to scrub the filth from her fingers before touching the king's table. Several nobles chuckled behind their hands. Zara did not blush. She met Alistair's gaze with cold fire. "These stains come from brewing cures for the diseases you catch in the city brothels, Lord Alistair. Next time you need a rash cream, I will be sure to charge you double." The table went dead silent. Alistair's face turned the color of a smashed plum. He opened his mouth to shout an insult. He never got the chance. Rurik reached over. He gripped Zara by the waist, lifted her out of her chair, and pulled her directly into his lap. The entire room gasped. Zara stiffened, her hands flying to his broad shoulders to steady herself. Rurik wrapped a strong arm around her waist, locking her in place. He looked down the table, his brilliant gold eyes flashing with raw predator dominance. "Speak to her with disrespect again," Rurik promised the room, his voice a lethal rumble. "And I will rip your tongues out and feed them to my hounds. She stays where I put her." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. The public claim sent a shockwave through the room. The trap was set. The spies had their show. Chapter 8. The rest of the dinner passed in tense, suffocating silence. The nobles ate their food with quiet, stiff movements, terrified to draw Rurik's attention. Zara remained seated in Rurik's lap. The physical contact sent a continuous stream of heat through the mind link. She felt his steady heartbeat against her back. She felt the coiled power in the arm wrapped around her waist. She focused on the dessert course to distract herself. The human servants cleared the dinner plates and returned with trays of candied fruits and spun sugar. Zara picked a candied cherry from a crystal bowl and popped it into her mouth. Under the table, Edgar squawked softly, demanding dropped crumbs. "They are terrified of you," Zara whispered, leaning her head back slightly. "Good," Rurik murmured near her ear. "Fear keeps them honest." A new servant approached the head of the table. He wore the standard royal uniform, but his posture was wrong. His steps were too quick, too rigid. He held a small silver tray carrying a single slice of cake. Zara's instincts flared. The hair on her arms stood up. She felt a sudden spike of adrenaline, but it wasn't her own. It belonged to the servant. The man stopped beside Rurik's chair. Instead of lowering the tray, he dropped it. The silver clattered against the stone floor. His hand darted beneath his uniform jacket. Steel flashed in the candlelight. An assassin! The man lunged, a jagged dagger aimed straight for Rurik's throat. Time slowed to a crawl. Rurik reacted, his free hand shooting up to block the strike, but the blade was too close. Zara didn't think. She pulled raw magic straight from her emotions. Fear, anger, and chaotic energy surged from her chest, down her arm, and into her palm. She threw her hand out. A blast of pure kinetic force erupted from her fingertips. The shockwaves slammed into the assassin's chest. The impact lifted the man off his feet and threw him backward. He crashed into a heavy wooden serving cart, splintering the wood. The dagger flew from his grip and embedded itself deep into the stone wall with a loud thwack. Chaos exploded in the dining hall. Nobles screamed and scrambled from their chairs. General Bram charged through the double doors, his blade drawn, shouting orders to the guards. The assassin did not stay down. He scrambled out of the wreckage of the serving cart. Knowing the element of surprise was lost, he sprinted toward a large, stained glass window at the edge of the hall. He threw his arms over his head and crashed right through the glass. Shards rained down into the dark courtyard below. Bram and his guards rushed to the broken window, looking out into the night. "He is gone." "Sire!" Bram shouted. "He vanished into the hedge maze!" Rurik stood up, gently setting Zara on her feet. He stalked over to the wrecked serving cart. His boots crunched over the shattered glass and broken wood. He leaned down and picked up an object the assassin left behind. It was a small, circular wooden token. The surface was burned with a specific symbol, a twisted crescent moon wrapping around an apothecary cauldron. The coven's emblem. Rurik turned to Zara, holding the token up. His eyes burned with anticipation. The bait had worked. The war had officially started. "Well," Rurik said, a dark smile playing on his lips. "It seems Sybil received our invitation." Chapter 9. The assassin's attack changed the rules. Rurik refused to let Zara out of his sight. He grabbed her hand right there in the dining hall and pulled her past the splintered serving cart. He didn't take her back to the guest suite. He marched her straight to the highest tower of the castle, into his private royal bedroom. Zara stepped inside and dropped her leather potion bag on the floor. The room felt suffocating. Dark oak paneled the walls. A heavy bed dominated the space, covered in thick furs. There was no escaping the predator energy in here. "I need my own space," Zara demanded, turning to face him. She still wore the sapphire blue gown, her dark, curly hair wild around her shoulders. "You lost your space the moment a coven dagger hit my wall," Rurik countered. He unbuttoned the top of his tailored black suit, his gold eyes locking onto hers. "You stay where I can protect you." "I don't need your protection," she shot back. "I blasted that assassin through a stained glass window. You should be paying me for guard duty." Rurik let out a low chuckle. He stepped closer, the physical distance between them evaporating. The forced proximity hit them both like a physical blow. The mind link hummed, a live wire connecting their brains. Zara felt his pulse thrumming in her own veins. She felt the raw, undeniable heat pooling in his gut. He was thinking about the way she looked in his lap during the dinner. "Get out of my head," Zara ordered through the bond, her cheeks flushing hot. "Make me," Rurik challenged back. A loud clatter broke the tension. They both snapped their heads toward the noise. Edgar stood on the large oak dresser. The grumpy raven had a heavy piece of metal clamped in his beak. It was Rurik's spare crown, a circlet of pure white gold, safe for a Lycan's skin. Edgar dropped the crown onto a pile of Rurik's discarded silk ties. He squawked, hopped into the center of the metal ring, and began pulling the ties around himself to build a nest. "Ruin," Edgar muttered, plucking a loose thread from a blue tie. "Did that bird just steal my crown?" Rurik asked, his voice flat. "He likes shiny things," Zara said, crossing her arms. "And he is stressed. You should feed him a cracker." Rurik glared at the raven. "I don't have crackers in my suit pants, witch. I am a king, not a bakery." Then you better hope he doesn't decide to nest in your boots next, she replied with a sharp grin. Rurik sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. The tension in the room shifted, morphing from dangerous heat to sheer exhaustion. The adrenaline of the fight finally caught up with them. Rurik pointed to the large bed. "Take the left side," he ordered. "I take the right. If you cross the invisible line, I will consider it an invitation." Zara narrowed her eyes, magic warming her fingertips. "If you cross the line, dog, you will wake up with your sheets on fire." Rurik just smirked. He stripped off his suit jacket. Zara turned her back, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Forced proximity was one thing. Sleeping in the same bed with a territorial alpha was a guaranteed recipe for chaos. Chapter 10. The morning sun hit the castle training grounds. Dust kicked up into the air. Zara sat on a wooden bench at the edge of the dirt ring. She had changed into a pair of simple canvas trousers and a tunic provided by the royal maids. Her leather potion bag rested by her feet. Edgar paced back and forth on the bench beside her, glaring at the morning light. Inside the ring, Rurik sparred with 3 of his top guards. He moved like a force of nature. He didn't use a blade. He fought with brutal, calculated strikes, his broad chest gleaming with sweat under the sun. He dropped the first guard with a sweeping kick, dodged a punch from the second, and tossed the third into the dirt with raw strength. "Your footwork is sloppy on the left side," Zara called out. Rurik froze. The 3 guards scrambled back to their feet, panting hard. Rurik turned his head, his gold eyes locking onto Zara sitting on the bench. "Excuse me?" Rurik asked, his voice a low rumble. "You favor your right leg," Zara continued, leaning forward and resting her elbows on her knees. "When that second guard threw a hook, you pivoted too slow. A decent street fighter would have swept your left knee and put you in the dirt." The guards exchanged terrified looks. No one critiqued the king. Rurik didn't yell. A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. He waved a hand at his men. "Dismissed." The guards didn't need to be told twice. They hurried out of the ring, leaving Rurik alone in the dirt. He rolled his broad shoulders and began stalking toward Zara. His boots crunched against the dry earth. The predator energy rolling off him spiked through the mind link, heavy and focused. He didn't stop at the edge of the ring. He walked right up to the wooden bench. Zara didn't flinch. She stood up, meeting him toe-to-toe. She lifted her chin. Rurik reached out, gripping her shoulders. He spun her around and pressed her back against the thick wooden post supporting the weapon rack. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. He boxed her in, planting his hands on the wood on either side of her head. "You think you can teach me how to fight, little witch?" Rurik murmured, leaning down so his face hovered inches from hers. "I think you need a better sparring partner," Zara shot back. She didn't shrink away from his heat. She let the chaos magic pool in her palms, ready to spark. "Then show me," Rurik challenged. He pressed closer, testing her limits. "Hit me. Use that fire you love to threaten me with." Zara's pulse hammered. She felt his heartbeat thudding a frantic rhythm, matching her own. The air between them turned electric. She raised her hand, the faint purple stains on her knuckles practically glowing. "I will burn you," she thought, projecting the threat loud and clear. "I want you to," he answered in her mind. Before the magic could snap, the heavy thud of running boots broke the spell. General Bram sprinted onto the training grounds, his face flushed, the jagged scar on his brow tight with stress. "Sire!" Bram shouted, gasping for breath. "Urgent news from the southern borders!" Chapter 11. Rurik pushed off the wooden post, breaking the tense standoff. The heat in his gold eyes instantly turned to ice. He turned to face his general. "Report, Bram," Rurik commanded, crossing his arms over his chest. Bram stood at attention, still catching his breath. "Human mercenaries, sire. Dozens of them. They launched coordinated raids on 3 of our southern border outposts right before dawn. They burned the supply barns and slaughtered the patrol hounds. The local packs are calling for immediate reinforcement. Zara stayed leaning against the wooden post, listening close. Her instincts flared. The timing felt entirely wrong. The coven elders just sent an assassin to the castle last night. Now, human mercenaries attack the furthest edge of the kingdom? It is a distraction. The sound of marching boots and shouting commanders echoed through the courtyard. Zara stood on the balcony of Rurik's bedroom, watching the royal army march out of the heavy iron gates. The dust kicked up by hundreds of soldiers plumed into the morning sky. The castle felt suddenly empty. The heavy silence pressed against the stone walls. Rurik stood beside her, his hands gripping the stone railing. The white gold signet ring on his finger caught the light. "They are coming for us now," Zara said, keeping her eyes on the retreating army. "Let them come," Rurik replied. He didn't look scared. He looked hungry. "Sybil thinks she is playing a game of chess. She forgets I prefer to flip the board." Edgar waddled out onto the balcony, dragging one of Rurik's silk ties behind him. The raven hopped onto the stone railing, looked at the empty courtyard, and let out a loud, grating squawk. "Doom!" the bird announced. Zara reached into her scuffed leather bag. She pulled out a small glass vial filled with a thick, glowing green liquid, a combat potion. She uncorked it, the smell of sulfur and crushed nettle hitting the air. "I agree with the bird," Zara said. "We better get ready." Chapter 12. The attack didn't come from the front gates. It came from beneath the glass. Rurik moved Zara to the royal greenhouse for safety, hoping the isolated glass structure behind the inner walls would keep her hidden while he tracked the remaining guards. It was a mistake. Zara stood among the towering rows of rare orchids and thick fern bushes. The humid air clung to her skin. Her leather potion bag hung heavy on her shoulder. A sharp crack echoed through the damp air. The sprawling glass ceiling above them shattered inward. Shards of glass rained down like jagged hail. Zara threw her arms over her head, tucking her chin to protect her face. The heavy glass smashed into the dirt and crushed the delicate orchids. Dark figures dropped through the broken roof, landing hard in the dirt. 5 human mercenaries dressed in dark leather armor drew wicked, curved blades. They didn't come to steal codes, they came to kill. "Target acquired!" the lead mercenary shouted, pointing his blade at Zara. A feral roar shook the glass walls. Rurik launched himself from the shadows of the ferns. He didn't bother to shift into his wolf form. He hit the first mercenary with raw, brutal momentum. His fist collided with the man's jaw, sending him crashing through a wooden planting table. The wood splintered into a dozen pieces. "Behind you!" Zara yelled. A second mercenary lunged at Rurik's back. Zara didn't hesitate. She plunged her hand into her satchel, her fingers wrapping around a vial of blue spark dust. She ripped the cork off with her teeth and hurled the glass vial straight at the attacker. The vial shattered against the mercenary's chest armor. The spark dust ignited on impact, erupting into a blinding flash of blue fire. The man screamed, dropping his blade and clawing at his burning vest. 3 mercenaries left. They realized Rurik was a wall of muscle and teeth, so they pivoted, charging straight for Zara. Zara stood her ground. She pulled raw magic from the damp earth beneath her boots. Chaos energy surged up her legs, hot and violent. She slammed her palms together. A shockwave of pure kinetic force exploded outward, ripping through the row of ferns and slamming into the 3 men. The impact threw them backward, tangling them in the thick, thorny vines. Rurik finished off the burned mercenary, his gold eyes flashing with predatory rage. He turned, his chest heaving, and surveyed the wreckage. The greenhouse was destroyed. Broken glass coated the floor. The wooden planting table remained a pile of splinters. The mercenaries groaned, trapped in the thorny vines, their bodies broken by the kinetic blast. Rurik stalked over to Zara. The adrenaline of the fight ran hot between them, pulsing through the mind link in heavy, intoxicating waves. He grabbed her hand, his grip ironclad. "We need to move," Rurik ordered, his voice a low rumble. "More will come." He didn't wait for her to argue. He dragged her out of the ruined greenhouse, away from the broken glass and crushed flowers. They ran through the stone corridors, the echo of their boots the only sound in the empty castle. They reached his private royal bedroom. Rurik shoved the heavy oak door open, pulled Zara inside, and slammed the door shut behind them. The brass lock tumbled into place with a loud click. The fight was over, but the adrenaline refused to fade. They stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, the violent energy of the battle demanding a release. The tension between them reached a boiling point. Chapter 13. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The brass lock tumbled into place, sealing the royal bedroom from the rest of the castle. Rurik leaned his back against the wood. His chest heaved with every breath. He had not bothered to find a shirt after the sparring session in the dirt ring, and the fight in the greenhouse left his bare skin coated in sweat, dust, and the blood of the mercenaries. The white gold signet ring on his hand caught the dim light of the room. He stared at Zara. Zara stood near the edge of the large, fur-covered bed. Her fingers clamped tight around the strap of her bag. The canvas trousers and tunic clung to her frame, damp from the humid air of the ruined glass structure they just escaped. The mind link hummed. It was no longer a faint whisper. It was a roaring current. The sheer adrenaline of the brawl fed the connection, pumping a wild, chaotic heat straight into her veins. She felt the unyielding need rolling off him. He looks like a predator cornered in a cage, she thought, her pulse hammering a frantic rhythm in her throat. I am not the one trapped, his voice echoed back, dark and promising. Put the bag down, Rurik commanded. His voice held no room for argument. It was a raw, territorial order. Zara narrowed her eyes. She refused to yield control. She unclasped the leather strap and let the satchel hit the dark hardwood floor with a heavy thud, but she did not step back. You don't get to bark orders at me. I just saved your back from a curved blade. You owe me. I owe you? Rurik pushed off the door. He stalked toward her. Every step erased the distance between them. You think landing a single spark potion makes you the commander of this room? I think you need to remember who holds the fire, she shot back. Chaos magic pooled in her palms, warming her knuckles. A loud, grating squawk shattered the tension. Edgar stood on top of the oak dresser. The raven had finished weaving 3 blue silk ties through the center of the spare white gold crown, constructing a messy nest. He hopped onto the edge of the wood and glared at the two of them. Starvation, the bird muttered, clicking his beak. Rurik didn't look at the raven. He kept his eyes locked on Zara. He reached blindly toward the side table, grabbed a brass goblet, and hurled it at the dresser. The metal clattered against the wood, missing the bird by a fraction. Edgar let out a squawk of offense and retreated into his silk nest, pulling a tie over his head. Now, Rurik growled, stopping mere inches from Zara. Where were we? Zara tilted her chin up. She pressed her glowing palms flat against his bare stomach. The heat of her magic singed the dirt on his skin. We were discussing boundaries. Rurik didn't flinch away from the burn. He stepped into it. He reached up, his large hands tangling in her dark curly hair. I hate boundaries. He hauled her flush against his torso. The collision knocked the breath from her lungs. Fire met ice. Her stubborn defiance crashed headfirst into his dominant strength. She smelled his scent, crushed sage and toasted sugar, mixing with the metallic tang of battle. Zara grabbed the back of his neck, gripping his hair tight. She pulled his mouth down to hers. The kiss was a declaration of war. Teeth clashed. He tasted like power and victory. Rurik groaned, a deep, animalistic sound that vibrated straight through her chest. He backed her up, driving her toward the mattress. The back of her knees hit the edge of the bed frame. I am going to consume her, he projected through the bond, a vow stripped of all civilized restraint. Try it, she fired back. Zara yanked her hands down, grabbing the hem of her own tunic. She pulled the canvas over her head and tossed it to the floor. Rurik's eyes tracked the movement, flashing with undeniable hunger. He gripped the waistband of her trousers, and the last remnants of control vanished. Clothes hit the dark wood, abandoned in the wake of the storm. Chapter 14. Skin burned against skin. The heavy furs of the bed swallowed them, a chaotic tangle of limbs and breathless demands. Rurik pinned her wrists to the mattress, securing her chaotic hands above her head. He loomed over her, a beast unleashed. The sheer weight of his attention sent a shockwave through the mind link. It was intoxicating. Zara arched her back, her nails scraping against his forearms. "Mine," Rurik whispered against her neck, his breath ghosting over her pulse point. Zara refused to be a passive participant. She twisted her wrists, slipping from his ironclad grip. She threaded her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him back up to meet her eyes. "I don't belong to anyone, but I will let you borrow me." A harsh laugh tore from his throat. He claimed her mouth again, swallowing her words. The intimacy was raw, untamed, and fueled by the surviving magic of the Debt-binder potion. As their bodies connected, the spell woven into their bloodlines surged to the surface. The room crackled with kinetic energy, the air pressure dropped. "You fight every step," Rurik thought, his mind wrapping around hers. "If I stop fighting, I disappear," Zara confessed through the link, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping past her defenses. Rurik's response was physical. He slowed his relentless pace, changing the rhythm from a battle to a worship. He mapped the curve of her waist, the dip of her spine. He breathed in her unique scent, crushed juniper berries and damp earth, letting it settle deep into his lungs. He anchored her. For the first time, Zara felt safe enough to let the chaos go. The magic needed an outlet. A sudden blast of purple kinetic energy erupted from Zara's skin. The force swept across the room. The two glass lamps resting on the bedside tables exploded. Shards of glass rained down onto the hardwood floor. The room plunged into the dim, moody light of the moon filtering through the windows. Rurik didn't care about the broken lamps. His fangs descended. He felt the ancient pull of his ancestors, demanding he solidify the bond. "Do it," Zara commanded, sensing his hesitation. She tilted her head, exposing the side of her neck. Rurik let out a primal growl. He sank his teeth into the soft skin where her shoulder met her neck. The pain was a sharp, brilliant sting, followed instantly by a flood of pure euphoria. The broken potion curse shattered completely. In its place, an ironclad permanent mate bond fused their souls together. Zara gasped, her back arching off the furs. She felt his strength pour into her, and he felt her wild, untamed fire anchor his beast. Bound. The word echoed in both of their minds simultaneously. They collapsed against each other, chests heaving in the dark. The broken glass crunched beneath the heavy oak bed frame as the castle settled into a heavy, exhausted silence. Rurik wrapped a strong arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. The war with the coven waited outside the locked door. Tonight, they belonged only to the storm they created. Chapter 15. Morning light crept through the arched windows, casting long shadows across the wrecked bedroom. The shattered remnants of the glass lamps caught the sun, glittering on the dark floorboards. Zara woke first. She lay tangled in the heavy furs, her cheek resting against a muscled shoulder. The mate bond hummed in the back of her mind, a steady, comforting rhythm. It no longer felt foreign. It felt like an extension of her own heartbeat. She could feel Rurik's deep, even sleep. She traced a finger over the fresh bite mark on her neck. It didn't hurt. It felt warm, sealing her chaos magic to his predator instincts. "I am a queen now," she thought, the realization hitting her. "And I still need to balance my ledger book." A rustling sound broke the quiet. Edgar hopped down from his silk tie nest on the dresser. The raven marched across the floor, avoiding the broken glass with practiced steps. He jumped onto the edge of the mattress and pecked Rurik's bare foot. "Wake! Doom! Crackers!" Edgar demanded. Rurik groaned, shifting his weight. His eyes snapped open, glowing a deep amber in the morning light. He stared at the bird, then looked at Zara. A slow, lazy grin spread across his face. "Tell your familiar to leave before I turn him into a feather duster," Rurik projected, his mental voice thick with sleep. "You try, and I set the bed on fire," Zara countered, returning the grin. Rurik sat up, pushing the furs aside. He ignored the raven and reached for his discarded canvas trousers. He pulled them on, his movements stiff from the previous day's violence. Zara found a clean linen tunic Rurik kept in the dresser and slipped it over her head. The fabric swallowed her frame, carrying the faint scent of toasted sugar. 3 sharp knocks pounded against the heavy oak door. The sound was frantic, desperate. Rurik's demeanor changed instantly. The lazy morning heat vanished, replaced by cold authority. He strode to the door, turning the brass lock and pulling the heavy wood open. A young guard named Gareth stood in the hallway. The boy looked terrified, his armor askew and his face pale. He took one look at the king and dropped to a knee. "Report," Rurik demanded. "Sire," Gareth stammered, his eyes darting to Zara standing near the bed. "It is a message from the lower market. We received word just moments ago." "Speak plain, boy," Rurik snapped. "It is the apothecary shop, sire. The coven struck during the night while the army was marching south." Gareth swallowed hard. "The building is in flames. The entire block is burning." The words hit Zara hard. Her knees locked. The shop was her sanctuary. It held her ingredients, her cauldrons, her mother's spellbooks, all of it turning to ash. Through the bond, Rurik felt her sudden, hollow grief. He turned to look at her, his jaw set like stone. He didn't offer empty comfort. He understood what the shop meant to her survival. "Get your bag," Rurik told her, his voice a lethal promise. "We are going to the city." Chapter 16. The rusted, plum-colored pickup truck tore through the cobblestone streets of the lower market. Rurik sat behind the wheel. The steering column groaned under his tight grip. He navigated the narrow alleys with reckless speed. Zara sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the windshield. Her satchel rested on her lap. Edgar sat on the dashboard, uncharacteristically silent. Thick, black smoke billowed into the morning sky, painting the clouds a bruised gray. Rurik slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt at the end of the street. The apothecary shop was gone. Only the charred wooden skeleton remained, standing amidst a pile of smoldering ash. The heat coming off the wreckage warped the air. Local merchants stood a safe distance away, throwing buckets of water on their own roofs to stop the spread. Zara pushed the truck door open and stepped onto the street. Her boots hit the soot-covered stones. She walked forward, the heat pressing against her face. "Everything I built," she thought, the devastation leaking through the mind link. Rurik stepped out of the truck and followed close behind. He did not touch her. He knew she needed to see it for herself. Zara stopped at the edge of the debris. The glass vials from her front window display were melted into puddles of warped slag. Her iron cauldron lay tipped on its side, cracked down the middle. She dropped to her knees in the ash, ignoring the grime staining the royal linen tunic. She reached out, running a soot-stained finger over a piece of intact wood near the doorway. It was the remains of her storefront sign. Words were burned deep into the timber. It wasn't standard fire damage. The letters glowed with a faint, residual blue magic. "Pay your debts, street rat. The vaults are next." The coven left a calling card. Matron Sybil wanted to make sure Zara knew exactly who lit the match. Zara stared at the mocking message. The hollow grief in her chest crystallized. It hardened into something cold, sharp, and terrifying. The chaos magic under her skin stopped humming and started to roar. Rurik walked up and stopped beside her. He looked down at the burned wood. The white gold ring on his finger glinted in the hazy light. He felt the shift in her emotions. He felt her raw grief transform into pure, unadulterated vengeance. "They think they broke you," Rurik stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Zara stood up. She wiped the soot from her hands, leaving dark streaks across her skin. They just gave me an excuse to stop playing by the rules. Good, Rurik murmured. He stepped closer, his presence a towering shield against the smoke. They took your home, so we will take their lives. I will gather the remaining guards. We hunt the elders tonight. Zara bent down and picked up a shard of charred wood from the wreckage. She slipped it into her leather bag. No guards, no armies. Sybil wants a war with a witch? She gets one. Edgar squawked from the hood of the plum-colored truck. Tragedy and ruin! For them, Zara promised, turning her back on the ashes. Chapter 17. The plum-colored truck rumbled to a stop near the edge of the royal woods. Rurik cut the engine. He pushed the driver's side door open and stepped out onto the dirt path. He still wore his canvas trousers and boots from the morning air biting at his bare chest. The white gold signet ring caught the dim light breaking through the tree canopy. Zara slid out of the passenger seat. She wore his oversized linen tunic, the hem falling past her soot-stained knees. Her scuffed leather bag hung from her shoulder. She reached in and pulled out the charred shard of wood, the coven's calling card from the ruined apothecary shop. Edgar hopped from the dashboard to the hood of the truck, fluffing his remaining tail feathers. The raven clicked his beak, watching the tree line. The trail starts here, Zara said, holding the burned wood flat in her palm. The magic they used to write the message leaves a specific frequency, a chaotic hum. I just need to match it. Rurik walked up behind her, his presence a solid, unyielding wall. The mate bond pulsed, steady and reassuring. He could feel the cold, sharp vengeance rolling off her in waves. Do it, Rurik ordered, his voice a low rumble. Find them. Zara set her jaw. She didn't have her cauldrons. She didn't have her mother's spellbooks. She just had raw earth magic and the tools in her bag. She unclasped the strap and dug past the mint salve. She pulled out a cracked glass vial. Rurik's stance shifted. He grabbed her wrist before the blade could touch her skin. What are you doing? A blood-tracking spell, Zara explained, meeting his gaze. The coven magic is old. The only way to lock on to the frequency without a cauldron is to use a living tether. My blood. Rurik glared at the jagged glass. His jaw clenched. The predator inside him hated seeing his mate bleed, even if the cut was her own choice. The bond surged with a sudden territorial roar. Find another way, he growled. There is no other way, she snapped back, refusing to drop the blade. I am not fragile, dog. A little cut won't kill me. I need to find the exact location of the elders before they realize we are hunting them. Rurik held her gaze for a long moment, the tension thick in the cold air. Finally, he released her wrist, stepping back half a pace. Make it fast. Zara pressed the edge of the cracked vial against the palm of her left hand. She dragged the glass across her skin, making a shallow, clean cut. Blood welled up, bright and warm. She ignored the sting. She pressed her bleeding palm flat against the charred shard of wood. She closed her eyes and pulled the chaos magic from the dirt beneath her boots. It rushed up her legs, hot and violent, mixing with her blood on the wood. The blue magic burned into the timber, flared. A thin, shimmering line of crimson light shot out from the wood, pointing straight toward the center of the city. Zara opened her eyes, tracing the glowing line. The Summer Solstice Festival. They are setting up the main square for the celebration tonight. They want an audience, Rurik thought, the realization echoing across the link. They want a public execution, Zara replied, wrapping a spare strip of linen around her bleeding palm. She tossed the bloody glass back into her bag. Let us give them a show. Chapter 18. The castle armory smelled of oiled steel and old dust. Rurik pushed the heavy iron doors open. The room was mostly empty. General Bram had taken the best weapons and armor south with the main battalions. Rurik didn't care. He didn't need a sword to tear an elder apart. He walked past the empty racks and found a simple black tunic left behind by a guard. He pulled it over his head, covering his bare chest. Zara stood by a wooden workbench in the corner, unpacking her bag. She lined up her remaining glass vials. She had 2 vials of blue spark dust left, a jar of blinding powder, and a small flask of concentrated wolfsbane she usually sold to hunters. I will need more than tricks to break a coven, she thought, her hands gripping the edge of the wood. Rurik felt her frustration through the bond. He walked over, leaning against the workbench. He picked up the small flask of wolfsbane, holding the glass between his fingers. You cannot outmagic 20 trained witches with pocket change. I don't have a choice, Zara replied, snatching the flask back. My lab is a pile of ash. I have to fight with what I have. No, Rurik corrected. He reached down and grabbed the brass handle of a floor safe hidden beneath the workbench. He pulled it open, revealing a stash of raw, unrefined ether crystals. The stones glowed with a faint, pulsing light. Zara stared at the crystals. You hoard ether in your armory? A king keeps a full deck, Rurik stated, scooping a handful of the glowing stones and dropping them onto the wood. Take them. Feed your fire. Zara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the crystals, shoving them into her leather bag. The raw energy immediately started humming against her hip. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it gave her the raw fuel she needed to hold a shield or cast a major kinetic blast. Edgar waddled into the armory, his claws clicking against the stone floor. The raven stopped at the edge of the workbench and let out a loud, grating squawk. Cage, the bird croaked. Cage of thorns. Zara froze, looking at the raven. What did he just say? He said cage of thorns, Rurik repeated, his eyes narrowing. He is a cursed guard. He knows their tactics. A thorn barrier, Zara realized, the puzzle pieces clicking together. It is an old coven trap. They drop a dome of magic over a specific area, locking the targets inside and keeping reinforcements out. If they use it in the festival square, your skeleton crew won't be able to break through. Then we make sure the skeleton crew stays at the castle, Rurik decided. He turned his white gold ring around his finger. We walk into the square alone. We spring the trap on our own terms. Zara zipped her bag shut. She looked at Rurik, the chaotic fire in her chest burning steady. Fire and fangs. Fire and fangs, Rurik agreed. They left the armory, leaving the empty weapon racks behind. The sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across the courtyard. The hunt was on. Chapter 19. The summer solstice festival usually filled the city square with music and laughter. Tonight, the cobblestones felt like a graveyard. Rurik and Zara walked down the main avenue. The plum-colored truck sat parked 3 blocks away, hidden in an alley. Edgar remained in the cab, squawking about doom. The air in the square felt thick, heavy with static electricity. Colorful paper lanterns hung from the merchant stalls, but the stalls were empty. The musicians were gone. The citizens of the lower market had fled, sensing the predator energy rolling off the king and the dangerous hum of the witch at his side. Zara kept her hand resting on the leather strap of her bag. Her linen-wrapped palm throbbed, a dull ache reminding her of the stakes. She wore her canvas trousers and the oversized royal tunic. Rurik walked beside her in his black tunic and boots, his gold eyes scanning the dark alleys between the buildings. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of their boots on the stone. "Show yourselves, cowards!" Rurik's voice boomed across the empty square, echoing off the brick walls. The shadows at the edge of the square shifted. Matron Sybil stepped out from behind a wooden fruit stand. She wore her high-collared velvet robe, her face twisted into a smug sneer. This was no projection. This was flesh and blood. 19 other coven members stepped out from the alleys, forming a wide circle around Rurik and Zara. They wore dark cloaks, their hands glowing with readied magic. 20 against 2. "You always were arrogant, beast," Sybil called out, her voice scraping against the quiet air. "Marching into the slaughter without your army." "I don't need an army to swat a fly," Rurik countered, stepping in front of Zara. The mate bond surged, his territorial instincts demanding he take the front line. "We took your little shop, Zara," Sybil mocked, turning her dark eyes to the witch. "We burned your legacy. Now we will strip your magic and take the king's vault codes from your mind." Zara stepped out from behind Rurik's broad shoulder. She didn't cower. She held her ground and met the matron's gaze. "You didn't take my legacy, Sybil. You just gave me a reason to stop holding back." Sybil laughed, a dry, hollow sound. She raised her arms, her hands glowing with a sick yellow light. "We will see about that. Spring the trap." The cobblestones beneath their feet began to tremble. Chapter 20. A deafening crack split the air. Thick, green vines erupted from the cobblestones at the edge of the square. The vines shot upward, twisting and weaving together at impossible speeds. They carried brutal, jagged thorns the size of daggers. Within seconds, the vines arched over the entire square, slamming together at the top to form a solid, impenetrable dome. The thorny dome. It blocked out the night sky and the paper lanterns, plunging the square into dim, green-tinted shadows. Rurik and Zara were locked inside. Outside the barrier, the faint shouts of the royal skeleton crew echoed against the vines. The guards slashed at the thick wood with their steel blades, but the magic held firm. The thorns didn't break. The trap was sprung, isolating the king and his mate from any help. "We are alone," Rurik projected through the link, his mind calm and focused. "Good," Zara replied, dropping her leather potion bag onto the cobblestones. "More room to work." "Kill the beast," Sybil commanded, dropping her arms. "Take the girl alive." The 19 coven fighters lunged forward. 5 of them threw blasts of kinetic energy straight at Rurik. Rurik didn't dodge, he charged. He let his predator instincts take over, moving with brutal, terrifying speed. He ducked under the first magic blast, grabbed a fighter by the throat, and hurled the man into a wooden merchant stall. The stall splintered on impact. Zara plunged her hand into her bag. She didn't grab a glass vial. She grabbed a handful of the raw, glowing ether crystals Rurik gave her. She squeezed the stones in her fist, letting the pure energy flood her veins. 3 witches closed in on her left flank, pulling daggers from their cloaks. Zara slammed her glowing fist into the cobblestones. Chaos magic erupted outward in a shockwave of blue fire. The blast caught the 3 witches in the chest, lifting them off their feet and throwing them hard against the thorny barrier. The jagged thorns caught their cloaks, pinning them in place. "Watch your right!" Zara shouted through the bond. Rurik spun just in time. A coven fighter swung a heavy iron mace toward his head. Rurik caught the iron handle with his bare hand, the metal groaning under his grip. He ripped the weapon away and delivered a devastating kick to the fighter's ribs. The bones snapped with a loud crack. Despite their speed, the numbers began to tell. The coven fighters adjusted their tactics, falling back to attack from a distance. A barrage of magical fire and sharp projectiles rained down on them. Rurik took a nasty hit to his left shoulder, a shard of magical ice slicing through his black tunic and drawing blood. He staggered back, his jaw clenching against the pain. The fast Lycan regeneration kicked in, but it wasn't fast enough to stop the next wave of attacks. Zara saw him take the hit. The mate bond screamed in protest. "Enough!" Zara yelled. She dropped to her knees, slamming both hands flat against the stones. She pulled every ounce of earth magic she possessed, feeding it with the raw ether crystals. A shimmering, semi-transparent blue dome erupted around her and Rurik, forming a protective shield. The coven's magic slammed against the shield, crackling and hissing, but the blue dome held firm. Rurik dropped to one knee beside her, breathing hard, his hand pressing against his bleeding shoulder. He looked at her, his gold eyes burning bright in the dim light. The shield bought them time, but the ether crystals were draining fast. The final clash was imminent. Chapter 21. The blue domes shuddered. Zara stayed on her knees, the cobblestones dug into her skin through the canvas fabric. The ether crystals burned hot in her closed fist. Outside the barrier, 16 remaining coven fighters hammered the shield with waves of kinetic force and sharp shards of magical ice. Rurik knelt beside her, his chest heaved. Blood soaked the fabric of his black tunic, dripping down from the gash in his shoulder. The Lycan healing worked, but the cold coven magic slowed the process, forcing his body to stitch the muscle together at a human pace. "They are trying to break the glass," Rurik grunted, his gaze locked on Matron Sybil standing safely behind the front line. "They won't break it," Zara strained. The raw energy of the crystals fought the chaotic hum of her earth magic. It was a volatile mix. The shield crackled, shedding sparks like a dying fire. The coven changed tactics. They stopped throwing ice and fire. Instead, they raised their hands in unison, their palms glowing with a sick yellow light. The cobblestones beneath the dome began to tremble again. The thick green vines forming the thorny dome shifted. The jagged thorns on the inner wall detached. They rained down toward the blue shield, heavy as iron spikes. The impact sounded like hail on a tin roof. The barrier splintered, the blue light fracturing. "I cannot hold the roof and the walls," Zara confessed through the link, the strain tearing at her focus. "The crystals are burning out." "Then drop it," Rurik ordered. Zara turned her head, looking at him. "If I drop it, they will skewer us." "They will try," Rurik corrected, his voice a low, lethal promise. The predator inside him clawed at the surface, demanding release. The pain in his shoulder didn't slow him down, it just made him angry. "I need room to move. Drop the shield, little witch." Zara didn't argue. She trusted the bond. She trusted him. She opened her fist. The drained ether crystals tumbled onto the stone, turning gray and dead. The blue domes shattered, evaporating into mist. The coven fighters lunged. Rurik exploded off the ground. He didn't shift fully into his wolf form, but the beast leaked into his human skin. His nails elongated into sharp claws. He roared, a sound that shook the remaining merchant stalls. He hit the first wave of fighters, his claws tearing through their dark cloaks. He moved in a blur, snapping a wrist here, crushing a knee there. Zara stayed low. She reached into her bag sitting on the stones. Her fingers bypassed the blinding powder and wrapped around the flask of concentrated wolfsbane. It was dangerous to use around a Lycan, but she needed to clear the field. She ripped the cork out with her teeth. She waited for a coven fighter to rush her blind spot. A tall man in a dark cloak charged, a jagged dagger raised. Zara hurled the open flask at his chest. The glass shattered. The wolfsbane exploded in a cloud of thick, toxic purple smoke. The fighter screamed, dropping the dagger and clawing at his burning eyes. The cloud expanded, forcing the other witches to fall back, coughing and gagging. Through the link, Zara felt the edge of the wolfsbane hit Rurik's senses. It stung his lungs, making him cough. "Stay out of the purple cloud," she warned, stepping back from the expanding smoke. "Noted," he fired back, driving his knee into a fighter's stomach. The battlefield was chaos, but Sybil remained untouched. The matron stood near the edge of the thorny dome, watching her fighters drop one by one. She sneered, raising her hands to cast a targeted blast of yellow magic straight at Zara's back. Chapter 22. Edgar waddled into the square. The Raven had escaped the cab of the truck through a cracked window. He squeezed through a small gap between the thick green vines of the thorny dome, hopping onto the cobblestones just as Matron Sybil prepared to strike. The bird glared at the matron. "Ruin!" Edgar squawked, jumping onto a splintered piece of wood. Sybil flinched, her concentration breaking for a fraction of a second. The blast of yellow magic flew wide, missing Zara and striking a paper lantern hanging from an empty stall. The lantern burst into flames. Zara whipped her head around, spotting Sybil in the burning stall. She saw Edgar pecking at the cobblestones near the matron's boots. The Raven bought her a precious second. He needs a boost, Zara realized, watching Rurik tear through the remaining fighters. His movements were slowing, The wolfsbane smoke stung his eyes, and the wound on his shoulder continued to bleed. The human mercenaries in the greenhouse were a warm-up. This was a war of attrition, and Sybil had the numbers. Zara didn't have any ether crystals left. She didn't have any combat potions. She had only one source of power remaining, the raw, untamed chaos magic humming in her own veins, amplified by the mate bond. She sprinted across the cracked cobblestones, dodging a blast of kinetic force from a desperate witch. She slid under a swinging mace and reached Rurik. He had just tossed a fighter to the ground, his chest heaving. Zara didn't stop. She grabbed the back of his neck, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. She pulled him down to her level. "Show them your teeth, Alpha," she commanded. She forced the last drop of her wild magic directly into the mate bond. The connection flared, a brilliant, blinding, white-hot flash in their minds. The chaos energy surged out of her hands and pumped straight into his bloodstream. The spell hit him like a lightning strike. Rurik's head snapped back. The human limits on his body shattered. Bones cracked, muscles bulged, and the black tunic ripped to shreds as his form twisted and grew. He didn't just shift into a wolf, he became a monster. He towered on all fours, his fur pitch black and thick. But it was the magic that made him terrifying. Glowing blue witchfire pulsed beneath his skin, tracing the lines of his ribs and illuminating his eyes. He let out a roar that vibrated the very air, shattering the remaining paper lanterns. The coven fighters froze in pure terror. The feral boost was complete. Rurik charged, a blur of shadow and blue flame. He didn't use tactics anymore. He used pure, unadulterated predator instinct. He tore through the enemy line, tossing trained witches aside like broken dolls. The remaining fighters broke rank, scrambling toward the edge of the thorny barrier, desperate to escape the monster they had trapped themselves with. Zara dropped to her knees, gasping for breath. The magic transfer drained her. The shallow cut on her palm throbbed against the linen wrap. She watched her mate decimate the coven, the bond feeding her his fierce, protective rage. Sybil realized the battle was lost. She backed away, her hands glowing yellow, trying to find a weak point in the very dome she had created to trap them. Chapter 23. The square belonged to the beast. Rurik hunted the remaining fighters. His heavy paws cracked the stones. The blue witchfire radiating from his fur singed the air. He cornered 3 witches against the splintered merchant stall, dropping them with a single, sweeping strike of his claws. Zara forced herself to stand. Her legs shook. Her chest ached. She had poured her reserve energy into the feral boost, but she refused to sit on the sidelines while Sybil tried to escape. The matron stood near the thick vines, muttering an incantation to dissolve a section of the thorny wall. She doesn't get to walk away, Zara thought, the vow carrying across the bond. Rurik heard her. He paused his hunt, turning his glowing gaze toward Sybil. "We finish it together," his voice rumbled in her mind, deep and beastly. Zara closed her eyes. She reached deep down, past the exhaustion, past the pain in her palm. She anchored herself to the damp earth beneath the city stones. She pulled the deep, ancient earth magic, letting it wrap around her like a second skin. Her body twisted. The world shifted. The canvas trousers and oversized linen tunic melted away, replaced by sleek, dark fur. Zara didn't shift into a wolf. She shifted into a shadow panther. Her form was smaller than Rurik's, woven from pure, twisting shadows and chaotic fire. She opened her eyes, seeing the world in sharp, predatory focus. She let out a low growl and leaped forward. Sybil turned, her eyes widening in horror as the 2 beasts closed in. The matron raised her hands, throwing a desperate, blinding yellow blast of magic. Zara moved faster than thought. She dodged the blast, her shadow form slipping under the light. She leaped, tackling Sybil to the ground. The impact knocked the wind from the matron's lungs. Zara pinned her down, her claws digging into the velvet robe, keeping the witch from casting another spell. Rurik stalked over, the blue fire in his fur casting long, terrifying shadows across the cracked stones. He stopped right in front of the matron. He lowered his heavy head, his teeth bared in a snarl. The remaining coven fighters, those who could still stand, dropped to their knees. They surrendered, throwing their hands up, completely broken by the sheer force of the royal pair. Edgar waddled out from beneath a broken stall, hopping onto a loose cobblestone near Rurik's paws. "End of days," the raven squawked, clicking his beak at the matron. Sybil stared up at the towering wolf and the shadow panther pinning her down. The arrogance vanished from her face, replaced by raw, naked fear. The trap she built became her own execution block. Zara kept her claws locked on the velvet. She looked at Rurik, the bond humming with absolute, unyielding victory. "She is yours," Zara projected, stepping back slightly to give him room. Chapter 24. Sybil scrambled backward across the cracked cobblestones, her velvet robe tearing against the rough stone. She pressed her back against the thick green vines of the thorny dome. There was nowhere left to run. The matron looked up at Rurik. The towering, fire-lit wolf stepped closer. "Wait!" Sybil choked out, raising her hands in a pathetic gesture of defense. "We can make a deal. I can sign the apothecary land over to her. I can lift the coven taxes. We can serve the crown." Rurik didn't shift back to human form. He didn't want to speak. He wanted to end the threat. He let out a low, vibrating growl that rattled the remaining glass in the empty merchant stalls. "You burned her home," Rurik thought, the words projecting straight into Sybil's mind through sheer, dominant force. "There are no deals." "Mercy, sire," Sybil begged, tears finally breaking through her cruel mask. "I am the matron. The coven needs me." "The coven needs to learn respect," Zara projected, her shadow panther form pacing near Rurik's flank. Rurik didn't hesitate. He lunged, his jaws clamped down. The execution was fast, brutal, and final. He ended the matron's reign without a second thought. The moment Sybil drew her last breath, the magic sustaining the barrier shattered. The thick green vines of the thorny dome withered instantly, turning brown and brittle. The towering structure collapsed, crumbling into dust and dead leaves that rained down over the square. The night sky reappeared, the moon casting a pale light over the wreckage. The guard captain burst into the square, leading a squad of 20 guards. The skeleton crew had finally broken through. They rushed forward with drawn steel, ready for a war. The captain skidded to a halt, his jaw dropping. The square was a disaster zone. The cobblestones were cracked and scorched. The merchant stalls were splintered kindling. The 19 coven fighters knelt on the ground, terrified and beaten. And in the center of the wreckage stood the king in his feral, fire-lit wolf form and a shadow panther standing guard by his side. "Secure the prisoners!" the captain yelled, recovering his wits. The guards moved in, slapping iron cuffs on the surviving witches. Rurik let out a heavy breath. The blue witch fire beneath his skin faded. The bones cracked and shifted as he pulled himself back into his human form. He stood naked amidst the ruins, his chest heaving. The gash on his shoulder was already closing, the coven magic broken with Sybil's death. Zara released her hold on the earth magic. The shadow form dissolved, leaving her back in her canvas trousers and the oversized linen tunic. She stumbled, the exhaustion finally hitting her like a falling wall. Rurik caught her before her knees hit the stone. He pulled her flush against his chest, burying his face in her dark, curly hair. "It is over," he murmured, his voice rough. Edgar waddled over to Sybil's discarded velvet robe. The raven pecked a shiny gold button off the fabric, clamped it in his beak, and looked up at the king. "Tragedy," Edgar announced, hopping away with his prize. Zara let out a weak laugh, resting her head against Rurik's bare chest. The coven was broken. The shop was ash. But as she felt his steady heartbeat through the mate bond, she knew she had won the war. Chapter 25. The dust from the fallen thorny dome settled over the cracked cobblestones. The main square looked like a war zone. Splintered wood from the merchant stalls littered the ground, mixing with the scorched stones from Zara's kinetic blasts. Zara leaned against Rurik, drawing on the steady, anchoring heat of the mate bond. The raw earth magic had drained her, leaving her limbs heavy. The shallow cut on her left palm throbbed against the linen wrap. She forced herself to stand tall, pulling away from Rurik's bare chest. She smoothed down the front of her oversized royal tunic. She wanted to face the surviving witches on her own feet. The nameless guard captain who led the skeleton crew from the castle stepped forward. He averted his eyes from his naked king, focusing on the 19 coven fighters kneeling on the stones. The guards had bound their wrists in heavy iron cuffs. The witches looked broken, their dark cloaks torn and singed by blue witch fire. "Sire," the captain reported, his voice tight with lingering adrenaline. "The prisoners are secured. Do we march them to the dungeons?" Rurik stood tall amidst the wreckage. The bleeding gash on his left shoulder from the ice shard had already sealed shut. He didn't bother covering himself. He owned the space. He looked down at the kneeling fighters, his gaze sweeping over the terrified faces. "What do we do with them?" Rurik projected through the link. "They were following orders," Zara answered, keeping her expression cold. "Sybil held their coin and their lives. If you execute them all, you just create 19 new martyrs for the lower market to worship." Rurik let out a low hum of agreement. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the prisoners. "Matron Sybil burned a shop that belonged to my mate," Rurik announced. His voice echoed off the brick buildings, a deep rumble that carried across the square. "She attempted to steal from the royal vaults. She paid the price." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the night air. The citizens of the lower market, who had fled the square earlier, were beginning to creep back out from the alleyways. They gathered at the edges of the destruction, watching their king. "I have no interest in killing sheep who blindly follow a dead shepherd," Rurik continued. "The coven is dissolved. Your magic is now subject to the laws of the crown. Return to your homes, but remember who spared your lives tonight." The coven fighters stared in disbelief. One by one, they bowed their heads, accepting the mercy. The guard captain stepped up with a ring of keys and began unlocking the iron cuffs. The witches scrambled to their feet and fled the square, disappearing into the dark streets. Rurik turned back to Zara. He reached out and caught her hand, ignoring the grime covering her skin. He didn't care about the gathered crowd or the guards. He pulled her flush against his chest, dipping his head to claim her mouth in a searing, possessive kiss. The crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and cheers. The king was claiming a street apothecary as his queen in the middle of a ruined square, standing over the dust of a broken coven. "Show off," Zara thought, pulling back to catch her breath. "I just want everyone to know whose fire this is," Rurik purred in her mind. Edgar waddled up to their boots. The raven still held the shiny gold button from Sybil's robe in his beak. He dropped it on the cobblestones and let out a sharp croak. "Snacks!" the bird demanded. Zara laughed, a genuine sound that broke the heavy tension of the night. The war was over. Now, they just had to clean up the mess. Chapter 26. 3 weeks later, the smell of fresh pine and wet paint replaced the scent of smoldering ash. Zara stood in the center of her new apothecary shop in the lower market. Rurik had kept his promise. He emptied a fraction of the royal vault to rebuild the structure from the ground up. It was no longer a cramped, failing business. The new shop featured high ceilings, rows of sturdy oak shelves, and a sprawling front window display. She walked behind the long wooden counter. Her satchel sat on a stool nearby. She traced a finger over the smooth surface of a brand-new iron cauldron, free of any cracks. The ledger book sitting next to it was finally balanced. The brass bell above the front door jingled. Rurik stepped inside, ducking slightly to clear the frame. He wore a simple black Henley and canvas trousers. He crossed the room, his boots thudding against the new floorboards. He carried a heavy wooden crate in his arms. "The last shipment from the southern trade route," Rurik said, setting the crate on the counter. Dried mandrake root and crushed pearl. The merchants practically gave it away when they heard it was for the queen. I am not the queen yet, Zara corrected, grabbing a pry bar from under the counter to pop the crate open. The ceremony isn't until tonight. A technicality, Rurik dismissed. He leaned over the counter, invading her space. The mate bond pulsed with a familiar, steady heat. He reached out, his thumb tracing the fading scar on her left palm where she cut herself for the tracking spell. Before Zara could respond, a loud clatter echoed from the back room. Edgar waddled out from behind a stack of shipping crates. The raven had a fresh, empty glass vial clamped in his beak. He hopped onto the bottom shelf of a display case and shoved the vial behind a row of sleep syrup bottles, adding to his secret hoard. "Drop it, you feathered thief!" Zara ordered, pointing the pry bar at the bird. Edgar ignored her. He clacked his beak, squawking, "Ruin and taxes." "He has stolen 10 vials this week," Rurik noted, leaning against the counter. "I should have let the mercenaries turn him into a roast." "He earned those vials," Zara defended, prying the lid off the wooden crate. "He warned us about the thorny dome." She sifted through the dried roots, the sharp scent of the herbs filling the air. It was a good smell. It smelled like stability. She looked up at Rurik, catching the dark amusement playing on his lips. "You are avoiding the castle," he projected, reading the tension in her shoulders. "I am not avoiding the castle," she fired back. "I just prefer the smell of my lab to the smell of those snobby nobles." "The nobles will behave tonight," Rurik promised out loud, "or I will let you set their silk coats on fire." Zara smirked. She reached into the crate, pulled out a handful of crushed pearl, and tossed it into the new cauldron. "I might hold you to that." She grabbed her leather bag, slinging the strap over her shoulder. She stepped out from behind the counter, locking the new front door behind them. It was time to face the royal court. Chapter 27. The grand throne room was a sea of velvet, silk, and polished armor. Zara stood behind the heavy double doors, waiting for the signal. The royal maids had outdone themselves. She wore a striking crimson dress, the heavy fabric sweeping the floor. The bodice was embroidered with intricate black thread, mimicking the twisting vines of earth magic. She left her bag in her new shop, choosing to walk into this room armed only with the mate bond. The heavy doors swung inward, the trumpets blared. Zara stepped forward. The room fell silent. Dozens of nobles, including the pale Lord Alistair, lined the walls. They kept their heads bowed, terrified of the woman who had helped tear down the coven. The shattered stained glass window in the adjacent dining hall was still boarded up, a constant physical reminder of the coven's failed attack. She walked down the long velvet runner toward the raised dais. Rurik waited at the top of the stairs. He wore the formal royal attire, a tailored black uniform with silver piping, though he still wore his safe white gold signet ring. He looked like a predator playing dress-up. Zara climbed the stairs and stopped in front of him. The high priest, a nervous man in white robes, stepped forward, holding a velvet cushion. Resting on the cushion was the queen's crown, a delicate circlet of white gold, matching Rurik's ring. "We gather to witness the binding of the king and his chosen mate," the high priest began, his voice shaking slightly. He looked at a scroll in his hands. "Do you, Zara of the lower market, vow to serve the crown, yield to the king's wisdom, and—" "Skip the yielding part," Zara interrupted, her voice cutting through the silent room. The high priest choked, dropping the scroll. The nobles exchanged shocked, panicked looks. Zara kept her gaze locked on Rurik. She tilted her chin up, challenging him right in front of the entire court. Rurik didn't look angry. The predator inside him thrilled at the defiance. A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. "You heard her," Rurik told the priest, his voice a low rumble. "Skip it." The high priest scrambled to pick up the crown from the cushion. He held it out to Rurik with trembling hands. Rurik took the white gold circlet. He stepped closer to Zara, the physical distance vanishing. The heat of the mate bond flared, drowning out the nervous energy of the room. He lifted the crown and settled it onto her dark curls. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "I don't want you to yield," Rurik whispered, his breath ghosting over the permanent bite mark on her neck. He promised her a night of wild, untamed chaos once the heavy doors to their bedroom were locked. Zara's pulse hammered. A flush crept up her neck, but she didn't back down. "Try to keep up, dog," she whispered back. Rurik grabbed her waist and kissed her, sealing the vow in front of the terrified court. The trumpets blared again, but neither of them heard the noise. They only heard the steady, answering rhythm of the fire and ice clashing in their veins. Chapter 28. The engine of the cobalt blue sports coupe roared over the sound of the crashing ocean waves. Rurik drove fast. He pushed the car to the limit, tearing down the winding coastal road that hugged the edge of the kingdom's cliffs. The royal ceremony was over. The stuffy nobles were left behind in the castle to gossip and drink cheap wine. Zara sat in the passenger seat. She had hitched up the heavy fabric of the crimson dress, kicking off her stiff heels to rest her bare feet on the dashboard. The ocean wind whipped through the open windows, tangling her hair. The tension was gone. The surviving coven fighters were rebuilding the lower market. General Bram and the royal army had returned from the south, securing the borders. The ledger was finally balanced. She breathed in the scent of the car. It still smelled of crushed sage and toasted sugar. Rurik's scent. It mixed with the salty air of the ocean, settling deep into her lungs. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, raising her voice over the roar of the engine. "Nowhere," Rurik answered, shifting gears as they took a sharp corner. "I just wanted to get you out of that castle before you set Lord Alistair on fire." "He was staring at my potion stains again," Zara defended, holding up her hands. The faint purple marks still colored her knuckles. "I should have turned his wine into frog spit." Rurik let out a rough laugh. He reached across the center console and grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. His thumb traced the fading scar on her palm. "Let the guard handle Alistair," Rurik said, his gold eyes focused on the dark road ahead. Zara felt a sudden, familiar squawk from the back seat. She turned around. Edgar the raven sat perched on top of her satchel. The bird glared at the passing trees, his missing tail feathers ruffling in the wind. "Did you pack him?" Zara asked, raising an eyebrow. "He sneaked in while I was starting the engine," Rurik grumbled. He reached his free hand into the pocket of his tailored black uniform pants, pulled out a saltine cracker, and tossed it into the back seat without looking. Edgar snapped it up instantly. "Doom and crumbs," the bird muttered happily. Zara smiled, turning back to the windshield. The road stretched out before them, endless and wild. They didn't rule with traditional vows or quiet treaties. They ruled with teeth and fire. Rurik slammed the brakes, bringing the sports coupe to a sudden halt on a scenic overlook above the crashing waves. He put the car in park and unbuckled his belt. He didn't say a word. He just hauled her across the console and into his lap, tangling his hands in the crimson silk. The kiss was hot, urgent, and heavy with the promise of the night ahead. They broke apart, breathless, the mate bond singing with pure, unadulterated heat. Zara grabbed the collar of his uniform, pulling him back in for one last steamy kiss. Rurik hit the gas, and the cobalt blue car tore off into the dark. The end. Quick favor, don't run off just yet. If you thought Zara was bold for spilling a potion on a naked king and then threatening to fry his vocal cords, wait until you meet the firecracker in this next story on your screen. You have to hear how this mess starts. Click the video on your screen right now. It is a total wreck in the best way possible.